Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we step quietly into the warm, flickering corridors of a place you know so well, a place that carries magic in its walls, mystery in its corners, and comfort in its silence. This is the story of a painting that no one could quite understand, a portrait that hung in a quiet hallway of Hogwarts and never, ever spoke. It watched, always watched, but no one had ever heard it utter even a single word. This is a tale of whispers in the stone, of calm enchantments, and the quiet pull of magic that asks to be listened to, not with ears, but with the heart. As we begin our gentle journey, if you find yourself enjoying these quiet magical stories, you're most welcome to stay a little longer. Feel free to like the story, maybe subscribe if you haven't yet, and explore the other cozy tales waiting for you after this one ends. But for now, let's begin. It was a soft autumn evening at Hogwarts, the kind of evening where the sun had just disappeared behind the forbidden forest, leaving behind that warm golden haze that drapes the castle walls in sleepy light. Inside, the torches along the corridors had begun to glow to life one by one, gently humming with old magic. Their flames didn't flicker harshly. Instead, they swayed like dancers in a slow-motion lullaby, casting golden pools of light on the cold, worn stone beneath. The castle breathed its familiar rhythm, not loud, but alive. The rustle of a house elf passing quietly, the soft clinking of silverware far away in the great hall, and the occasional whisper from a portrait sharing news with another nearby. Portraits were always talkative. Some chuckled, some grumbled, some offered unsolicited advice to passing students. It was just part of life here. But down one lesser-used hallway on the 5th floor, tucked behind a tapestry of dancing badgers, was a portrait unlike the others. It didn't grumble, it didn't chuckle, it didn't even blink. It simply sat, still, watching, silent. Most students never noticed it. Those who did simply said, "That one never talks," and moved on. But the few who passed often enough began to feel its presence more keenly. There was a stillness in its eyes, a quiet that seemed deeper than silence. Not sad, not scary, just waiting. And it is in that quiet hallway, beneath the soft glow of torchlight and surrounded by the warmth of old stones, that our story gently begins. Just beyond the edge of curiosity, waiting for someone to listen. The student who first noticed the silent painting was Harry Potter, though even he could not quite explain why his eyes lingered there longer than usual. Perhaps it was habit, years of listening for what others overlooked, or perhaps Hogwarts itself had gently nudged his attention the way it sometimes did when something old wished to be remembered. Harry had always found comfort in the quieter corners of the castle. While others sought laughter in the common room or noise in the great hall, he often drifted toward places where the stone walls seemed to breathe more slowly. On this evening, he walked with his hands tucked loosely into the sleeves of his robe, footsteps unhurried, mind calm in a way it rarely was during daylight hours. Beside him walked Hermione Granger, her arms wrapped around a stack of books that threatened to tip at any moment. Even at this late hour, her eyes sparkled with quiet curiosity. She wasn't studying tonight, not exactly. These were the books she'd read when she wanted answers the library hadn't yet been asked for. Ancient magic, forgotten enchantments, and the habits of enchanted objects were her favorite topics when the castle slept. Trailing behind them was Ron Weasley, stifling a yawn and rubbing his eyes, though a faint smile tugged at his mouth. Ron pretended he didn't enjoy these nighttime wanderings, but he never missed them. There was something about being with his friends, when the castle was quiet and forgiving, that made even the strangest mysteries feel safe. "You ever notice," Ron murmured softly, "how Hogwarts sounds different at night?" Harry nodded, like it's listening instead of talking. Hermione smiled at that, her footsteps slowing as they passed through the fifth-floor corridor. That was when she stopped. "Huh," she whispered. Harry followed her gaze. There it was. The painting hung between two lively portraits, one loudly arguing about wizarding politics, the other snoring gently, with its subject slumped in a chair. But the painting between them was different. It showed a young witch seated at a wooden desk, hands folded calmly, eyes forward. No movement, no blinking, no shifting of posture, just stillness. Ron frowned. "That one broken?" Hermione stepped closer, careful, respectful. "No, I don't think so. The enchantment is intact. It's just quiet." Harry felt it then, the same gentle pull he'd felt earlier. Not magic calling loudly, but something softer, like a story waiting patiently for the right listener. The witch in the painting did not react, but somehow all three of them felt it. This portrait had something to say. It simply wasn't ready to speak. And for the first time that night, Hogwarts seemed to lean just a little closer, listening along with them. It had been just another gray-skied Thursday at Hogwarts. The kind where the clouds pressed so low that the turrets of the castle seemed to pierce them like silent sentinels. Classes had trickled by in a lazy blur, and now the corridors were winding down into that soft, dim hour when dinner still lingered in the great hall and candles began flickering awake behind every stained glass pane. Amidst this quiet lull, Ellie wandered alone. Ellie wasn't known for attracting attention. A quiet Ravenclaw with ink-stained puffs and mismatched socks, she preferred books over banter, especially when the common room grew too noisy. This evening, instead of returning after dinner, she followed a hallway she didn't usually take. Not out of curiosity, but because the corridor seemed unusually quiet, perfectly still in a way that felt oddly expectant. She padded silently past classroom doors and tapestry-covered stone walls until her eyes caught something strange, a portrait that shouldn't have been there. It hung at the far end of the hallway, half hidden in shadow. The frame was thick, older than the others nearby, its golden paint dulled and cracked with age. And within it, a young student, a Hogwarts student by the look of it, but one Ellie didn't recognize, not from any house she knew. He sat alone in the portrait, perched on a library stool. His face was obscured at first, turned toward a heavy book that rested in his lap. But what caught Ellie most was the peculiar look of the background. It wasn't the usual tapestry or sunlit backdrop common in other portraits. No, this portrait showed a small, empty classroom filled with strange runes and odd flickering candlelight, as if time were stuck mid-spell. Ellie took a tentative step closer. The boy turned, his eyes locked with hers, and he smiled. Ellie jumped back. She glanced quickly down the hall. No one. She looked again. The portrait was still. The boy had returned to reading as though nothing had happened, but Ellie's skin prickled. Her breath fogged faintly in front of her. Like the air had grown colder, she inched closer again. "Who are you?" she whispered. No answer. Elke reached for the small brass plaque beneath the portrait. Most portraits had names engraved. This one was blank. A smooth plate of worn brass. Not even the ghost of a name etched into it. Then, as if in response to her whisper, something in the portrait changed. The candlelight in the painted room inside the frame shimmered oddly, like real fire catching a breeze. The student raised his head again, this time not to look at Ellie, but to lift the book in his lap. Slowly, deliberately, he opened it wider. Inside the painted book, letters began to glow, soft, silvery blue runes. One by one, they lit up, forming a sequence Ellie couldn't decipher. And then, with a sudden jolt, Ellie realized her own satchel felt warm. She opened it in a rush. Her own spellbook, a simple fourth-year copy of Standard Book of Spells, Grade 4, was glowing. Not just faintly, the entire cover shimmered like moonlight through fog. She pulled it free, fingers trembling. The moment it was in her hands, a page flipped open on its own, and the ink was gone. Not smudged, not erased, gone. A pristine white page, blank and humming softly in her fingers. She flipped to the next, gone. Every page she turned had been wiped clean, as if the spells had never existed. Suddenly, behind her, she heard a faint shuffle. She spun, but no one. Only the air, thick and strange, like it had been charged with silent magic. Heart pounding, Ellie turned back to the portrait. The student within had stood. He wasn't reading now. He had tucked the book under one arm and was walking across the tiny painted room toward the edge of the frame. He looked straight out now, as if addressing Ellie without words. And then he vanished, not walked out of frame. Vanished. The portrait now showed only the painted room, gently flickering. Ellie stood frozen, her hands clenched the glowing blank spellbook. Her chest rose and fell quickly, eyes darting between the empty frame and the blank pages in her grip. She had no explanation, no spell, no theory, only questions. The silence of the corridor seemed to lean in, listening. Carefully, she placed her spellbook back in her bag and took a cautious step backward from the portrait. But before she could turn, the plaque, the one that had been blank moments ago, began to change. Faint, curling script etched itself into the brass, the letters glowing with the same silvery blue hue as the runes from the painting. Just 2 words appeared, I remember. Ellie didn't know what to make of it. She returned to the Ravenclaw Tower that night, shaken, spellbook still blank, the words echoing in her mind. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friend, Amira, because there was something deeply private about what had happened, something that felt not dangerous, but sacred, like she had been invited into a memory that wasn't meant for most. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling of the common room dormitory, she whispered aloud, "Who are you?" And in that stillness, she thought she heard, only barely, a faint reply, like a voice carried on candle smoke. A boy's voice, soft. "I was here, once." The spellbook on her bedside table fluttered open, a single page lighting up with ghostly ink. A sentence wrote itself in script she'd never learned. "You will remember for both of us." Ellie sat upright in the dark, heart quietly thunderous. Somewhere deep in the castle, a portrait flickered softly to life, and the story began again. Night deepened over Hogwarts, and the stars outside the castle windows shimmered like tiny spells in the sky. Inside, the castle was settling, its great stone bones sighing with old magic. The dormitories had dimmed, and only a few enchanted lanterns glowed faintly in the corridors, casting soft golden halos onto the worn flagstone floors. In the stillness of that hour, something stirred again within the strange, faded portrait in the long-forgotten hallway near the charms classroom. Emma had returned to the corridor out of curiosity more than anything else. That afternoon, she had spoken with Professor Flitwick about the odd behavior of the frame she had glimpsed. He'd tilted his head thoughtfully, twirling the tip of his mustache, and had only said, "Some portraits remember more than they show, and some remember things that never were." His voice had trailed off into silence, and Emma had felt the tiniest thrill, not of fear, but of wonder. Now, holding a candle, enchanted with a soft blue light, she stood once more in front of the mysterious portrait. It still showed only the corner of an empty chair. The child, if there had been one, had vanished again. Emma stepped closer, trying not to make a sound, as if noise might scare the magic away. Suddenly, her candle flickered, not with wind, but with magic, responding to something unseen. And before her very eyes, the image within the frame shifted. The chair filled slowly, like ink spreading in water. At first it was just a shadowy shape, then a flicker of cloth, a sleeve, the slope of a shoulder. The child was returning, not all at once, but in layers, like a memory resurfacing. This time, Emma could see more. The figure was indeed a student, perhaps her age or slightly younger. Their robes were old-fashioned, not the current Hogwarts style, but the deep forest green and muted bronze trim of a much earlier time. The child had short hair, wide eyes, and an expression of quiet, almost expectant hope, but their features remained faint, like sunlight behind a fogged window, not fully formed, not fully there. Emma stepped even closer. "Hello?" she whispered. The child in the portrait blinked, and then something impossible happened. Emma felt, heard. "I see you," the portrait whispered back. The candle in her hand trembled again, this time not with flickering light, but with warmth, as if the magic in the frame was reaching out, brushing the very air between them. "You remember me?" the voice continued, distant, as if echoing through layers of time. "That's why I can be here." Emma's heart beat fast, but not with fear. It was wonder again, deeper now, more vivid. This portrait, this student who never was. They were aware. But how? Why? Who are you? Emma asked, voice steady, eyes wide. The child in the frame looked away for a moment, gazing at something unseen within their painted world. Then they turned back and said, gently, I tried to become a student once, long ago, but the sorting hat never sang for me. Emma frowned, confused. You were never sorted? The figure in the portrait nodded slowly. The hat was silent, not even a whisper. So they said the magic did not recognize me, and they sent me away. A wave of something like sorrow, not her own, washed over Emma, not sharp or painful, but gentle and old, like a long forgotten song. I stayed, the voice said again, not in the halls, but in the stone, in the frames, in the echoes. 100 questions filled Emma's mind, but she couldn't form a single one fast enough. Her candle flared softly once more, and with it, the portrait became clearer. The student's eyes, once cloudy, were brightening. With every word, every acknowledgement, they were becoming more real, more remembered. That's the magic, the child whispered. It's not just spells, it's memory, it's belonging. Emma reached out, just barely brushing the wooden frame of the portrait with her fingertips. The frame felt warm, alive, and then came a shift in the air, subtle, like a change in the direction of a breeze no one else would notice. Other portraits, further down the hallway, began to stir. Not their figures, but their frames. Glimmers of light ran through the wood and gold trim, like threads of memory connecting one canvas to another. It was as if the entire wall had been listening, waiting. One painting showed an empty common room from years gone by. Another, a sunlit corridor lined with student laughter, and within those scenes, brief flickers of a figure, the same green-robed child, barely visible, as if always present, but never seen. Emma turned slowly, watching them all begin to shimmer softly. You were never gone, she said, breath catching. You were just forgotten. The student in the portrait smiled, a small, grateful thing. Yes, the voice replied, and now I'm being remembered. The glow from Emma's candle grew warmer, then began to rise, floating gently from her hand like a soap bubble made of light. It drifted toward the portrait, pausing just at the edge of the frame. There, it gently touched the corner of the child's robe and vanished. The portrait changed once more. The student now sat taller, their features more defined. Their smile lingered on the small table beside them, once empty. There now rested an open book, its pages gently fluttering. Not a real book, but painted, magical, remembered. A name began to etch itself softly into the frame below, not in carved letters, but in golden paint, like ink drawn by memory itself. A student who tried, a student who stayed. Emma stood in silence, watching, heart full. The hallway felt warmer, like a long-lost friend had finally come home. No alarms rang, no professors came running. It was a quiet magic, the kind Hogwarts always saved for moments of true understanding. I'll come back, Emma promised. The student in the portrait nodded as Emma walked slowly back to her dormitory, candlelight gently guiding her path. The castle felt different, not louder or brighter, but deeper, as if she had unlocked a room not made of stone and spells, but of memory and belonging. And in the hallway behind her, the portrait that once held only an empty chair now held something far greater, a second chance, gently remembered. The magic hadn't vanished, it had only been waiting. The days passed slowly, and something in the air around Hogwarts had changed, not dramatically, not loudly, but like a subtle shift in season, something only the castle itself and those truly paying attention could feel. Emma was one of those few. Ever since that night in the forgotten corridor, where the portrait of the student who never was had stirred and spoken and grown clearer, Emma had been returning there regularly. Not every night, and never at the same time. She felt, somehow, that the portrait worked on its own rhythm, that it responded not to clocks or schedules, but to intention, to memory. Each time she visited, she brought something, a whisper of a question, a page from a forgotten school journal, once even a button she'd found near the library that looked decades old. And each time, the portrait shifted just a little more, not just clearer in form, but richer in story. The student within had begun to show her other things. Quiet rooms they remembered, glimpses of long-past professors, even fleeting images of spells they had once tried to learn before they were asked to leave. But tonight, the castle was hushed in a slightly different way. There was no storm, no omen, no flickering torchlight to hint at danger, just a stillness that pressed against the walls like an unread thought. Emma could feel it the moment she turned the corner toward the hidden corridor. The portrait was already glowing faintly, even before she arrived. That had never happened before. She stepped closer, and the student, now clearer than ever, though still faint around the edges, was already sitting upright in their chair, waiting. Their painted eyes looked right at her. "You've brought something," they said, and Emma blinked. She had, though she hadn't consciously realized it. Tucked in her pocket was a folded note she'd found fallen behind an old armoire in the Ravenclaw Tower. A note with no name, no signature, only one line, written in shaky ink. "You are still one of us." Emma slowly pulled it from her pocket and held it up toward the frame. The candlelight caught its creases, and the student inside the painting stared at it, not moving. "I don't know who it's from," Emma whispered, "but I think maybe it was meant for you." The figure in the portrait reached, not physically, but with their presence, and the glow around the frame pulsed softly. The note began to shimmer, and then something shifted. The entire corridor, the walls, the air, even the silence, took on a new weight, as if the magic had opened something larger than a painting. Emma turned slowly. The other portraits along the hallway had gone still, almost respectful, their figures fading slightly, as if stepping back to allow space. The student in the frame nodded once, solemnly. "I remember that message," they said. "It was written by someone who saw me, another first year, I think. They left it behind when they realized I was gone." Emma frowned gently. "But why wouldn't they have given it to you?" "They weren't allowed to speak of me," came the soft reply. "After I was turned away, it was as if I had never existed." Emma's heart ached, but before she could speak, the candle in her hand flickered and dimmed, then relit itself in soft blue flame. The hallway around her was changing. It wasn't a violent shift, but a smooth one, like a curtain being drawn back. The walls stretched subtly, the shadows rearranged. The paintings around her grew taller, their frames warping ever so slightly. It was as if the corridor itself was rearranging to make room for a memory that had been waiting too long. And at the very end of the hallway, where there had once only been a wall, there was now a door. A door made of old oak, etched with vines and stars, and the faint glimmer of a carved Hogwarts crest that looked incomplete. The serpent, the badger, the lion, and the eagle were there, but in the center, instead of a house name, there was only a circle of unmarked light. Emma stepped back. "What is that?" she whispered. The student in the portrait looked toward it, eyes distant. "That is what the castle remembers. A room that no one should remember. A room where students who didn't belong sometimes went to wait." Emma's breath caught. "Like you?" "Yes," came the answer. "But I wasn't the only one, just the last." The suspense was not sharp, not frightening, but wrapped in velvet quiet, the kind that draws you closer, not because of fear, but because of need, the need to understand, to complete a story left untold. Emma moved toward the door. It did not creak or resist. It simply opened, as if it had been waiting for her. Inside, the chamber was round, lined with paintings, scrolls, and stone benches, and in the center was a small pedestal with a single open book upon it. It wasn't dusty or old. It glowed faintly, its pages turning slowly of their own accord, as if being read by the air. Emma approached. The pages showed drawings, names, not of famous witches and wizards, not of known students, but of forgotten ones. Faces she had never seen before, each one labeled with phrases like, "stayed for a day," "almost sorted," "sent home," quietly. It was a memory book, not official, not archived, just remembered. And then the portrait student's voice echoed into the room, though they were not inside it. "You're in the room of the unsorted." Emma's heart beat softly in her chest. "There were always a few," the voice continued, "students who didn't fit the spell, who held magic in a way the sorting hat couldn't place. They weren't expelled. They weren't punished. They were dismissed, erased gently. The magic didn't understand them, so it forgot them." Emma reached out and gently touched one page. It flipped, and there, drawn in soft strokes, almost hesitant, was the portrait student. Not in a painting, in a page. Underneath, a name, Lena Morven. Emma whispered it aloud, and all at once, the room responded. A breeze that had no source stirred the torches. The paintings along the wall blinked, as if finally hearing their own names again. Back in the corridor, the portrait of Lena, the student who never was, smiled fully, no longer faded, no longer waiting. And Emma, standing alone in the room no one remembered, felt something deep and quiet shift inside her. She wasn't just witnessing a forgotten story. She was finishing it. Emma stood still for a long moment in the center of the room of the unsorted. The quiet seemed fuller now, not empty, but expectant, as if the room itself had welcomed her in, gently watching, waiting to see what she would do next. The glowing book remained open on the pedestal, its pages slowing, no longer turning on their own. It seemed to be listening too. She turned slowly in place, letting her eyes wander across the circular room. It was not large, but it felt vast in meaning. Along the stone walls, set into shallow alcoves, were soft carvings of names, most faded, some barely visible. A few shimmered faintly when she walked past them, just enough to catch her eye. She realized then that this was no ordinary space within the castle. It was not a classroom, nor a storage room, nor a passage between places. It was a memory, held in place not by brick and mortar, but by the will of the castle itself. And this room remembered. She passed another alcove where a pale outline of a wand had been carved into the stone beneath a name she didn't recognize. Beside it, faintly glowing, was a tiny charm, maybe left behind by another visitor long ago. A bead of crystal looped through a thread of silver. It hung in midair, weightless. There was no dust here, no cobwebs. The castle had kept it clean, not in appearance, but in feeling. Emma realized she was walking through a part of Hogwarts that even professors didn't know about. Or perhaps they had once known and chosen to forget. She returned to the center of the room where the book still waited. Its current page showed a name now fully written, Lena Morven, and underneath it, a hand-drawn sketch of the girl she had seen in the portrait. The smile, the posture, the slight tilt of the head, it was the same. Only here, she wasn't behind a frame. She looked alive, dreaming of belonging. Emma traced the lines of the page with one finger, careful not to touch it. Then she asked, aloud, gently, why was she unsorted? The page beneath her hand flickered faintly. She wasn't missing magic, said a voice behind her, and Emma turned to see the faint shimmer of Lena's presence again, not in the painting now, but as a soft figure standing in the doorway of the room. Her outline was pale, transparent, but calm. The hat couldn't place me, Lena said, her voice quiet. It didn't know where I fit. It tried once, twice, 3 times, but nothing happened. It told me I didn't belong in any of the houses. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because I didn't match what they were made for. Emma's heart tugged. That's not fair. It wasn't meant to be cruel, Lena replied, a faint smile on her lips. Just incomplete. The magic of Hogwarts was built a long time ago. It was made with rules, with patterns. It couldn't see beyond them. Emma sat down slowly on the nearest stone bench, feeling the weight of those words. But you were still a student. I tried to be, Lena said softly. I studied on my own, snuck into classrooms, read in the library, but without a house, there was no place to sleep, no one to share meals with. I became a shadow. Eventually, the magic of the castle stopped showing me doors. Hallways began to close. Teachers forgot my name. Emma's hands folded in her lap. But you were still here. For a while, Lena nodded, until the castle stopped remembering me. A pause, then Emma spoke carefully, but it didn't forget completely. Lena looked around the room, her translucent form flickering near the carved names. No, she said. Not completely. Some memories linger, especially ones that want to be found. Emma stood again, her eyes thoughtful. What if the sorting hat wasn't wrong? What if it just didn't have enough houses? Maybe you weren't unplaceable. Maybe you were something new. That made Lena pause. A long silence followed, and when she spoke again, her voice was steadier. I used to wonder that, she admitted, whether a fifth house could have existed, one for those who didn't fit the others, not better, not lesser, just different. Emma stepped forward. Maybe this room is that house. The words hung in the air like stardust. And then, gently, the book turned one final page. This time, it revealed a short passage written in golden ink. Those whom the houses could not hold were not broken, they were bridges. Emma blinked. It was the first time the book had offered a thought rather than a record. She looked up at Lena. What do I do with this? With your story? Lena gave her a soft smile, one full of peace, not regret. You already did something, she said. You saw me. Emma felt something shift inside her, a warmth that didn't come from torches or candlelight, a sense of purpose. She reached into her satchel and pulled out her journal, the same one where she wrote her observations, her dreams, her theories about forgotten magic. She flipped to a blank page and began to write, carefully, clearly, beginning with the portrait of a student who never was. And as she wrote, Lena's form began to fade, not in sorrow, but in release. The memory was no longer trapped in silence. It was being shared. Emma closed the journal with a quiet breath. She didn't need to tell a professor. She didn't need to make a grand announcement. She had chosen to remember, and the castle, in return, would remember too. The quiet glow of the room of the unsorted deepened, as if stirred by memory itself. Emma sat still, her fingers resting on the final page of the journal she had filled with Lena Morven's story, the student who had never been sorted, the one Hogwarts quietly forgot but never truly let go. She had expected silence, but something had changed. A gentle warmth, like candlelight breathing across stone, spread from the pedestal to the far corners of the room. Emma stood slowly. The air shimmered softly. She wasn't afraid. The magic felt ancient, but gentle, like something had waited a very long time to be seen, and now it could finally exhale. All around the room, the faint engravings in the stone began to glow. Names that had once been unreadable, now illuminated in warm gold and silver tones. Emma turned in a slow circle, eyes wide with awe. The alcoves, once dark, revealed keepsakes left behind, tiny buttons, pressed flowers, hand-drawn spells, broken wand tips. These weren't discarded items. They were remnants of lives that had passed through this hidden space. Not one student, not just Lena. There had been others. The realization moved through her like a breath catching in her throat. Hogwarts had held space, quiet, secret space, for those who were unplaceable, for students whose paths had not matched the four houses, but who had still carried magic, still learned, still belonged. This room wasn't a forgotten corner. It was a sanctuary. She stepped closer to the wall opposite the pedestal. There, a portrait frame shimmered, the same one that had first caught her attention days ago, But the girl in the frame was no longer sitting alone. Now, beside Lena, there were others, faint figures appearing in the background. A boy with ink-stained fingers and round glasses. A girl with hair that seemed to move like the pages of a book in wind. A student wrapped in threadbare robes, smiling through the gloom. All of them slowly fading into view. Not ghosts, not echoes, but painted memories brought to life by someone who had finally remembered them. Emma's heart filled with something warm and powerful. It wasn't sorrow, it was connection. Lena stepped from the edge of the frame again, not ghostly this time, but as a clear vision of herself. Her robes shimmered faintly, stitched in a deep twilight blue, unlike any of the 4 house colors. Emma wondered if they had once belonged to another time, another attempt at defining belonging. Lena didn't speak at first. She stood beside Emma, both of them facing the growing portrait wall together. Then, softly, "I wasn't alone." Emma nodded. "You weren't." "We thought we were," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Each of us, scattered, hidden, wondering if we were broken, but the castle never stopped holding us. It remembered." Emma felt tears behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from the quiet enormity of the truth. "This room, it isn't a mistake." Lena turned to her. "It's a memory made solid, a kindness folded into the walls." The golden light brightened near the ceiling, revealing something Emma hadn't noticed before. A symbol carved into the stone, a circle of 4 stars surrounding a 5th, smaller star in the center. Not a crest, not a house badge, a beacon. Emma stepped forward slowly, following the light as it spiraled upward, warming every corner of the room. The glow wasn't blinding. It was like sunrise through fog, gentle and patient. And then, the journal she had written began to lift gently from the pedestal, floating toward the symbol in the ceiling. Her breath caught. The book opened to its final page, the one with Lena's story, Emma's notes, and the line written in golden ink. Those whom the houses could not hold were not broken. They were bridges. The moment the page reached the ceiling, a pulse of soft magic spread outward. Not a spell, not an enchantment, a memory unlocking. Below, the carved symbol shimmered once, and then gently pressed inward, revealing a hidden door. Emma stared. A door in the ceiling. A ladder shimmered into view, wooden, floating just above the floor, stretching up toward the open space. The castle had waited until it was sure someone remembered, and now it had offered something more. Lena looked up, a peaceful smile on her face. "It's been waiting." Emma stepped forward, then paused. "What's up there?" Lena tilted her head slightly. Not answers, not certainty, but perhaps understanding. And then she turned to Emma fully. "I can't go with you. My place is here. But you still walk the halls. You still live." Emma nodded. Her voice shook a little, but she felt no fear. "I'll remember for all of you." Lena's image began to fade again, not in loss, but in release, her edges softening into light. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing what others could not." Emma placed one hand on the ladder. The moment she did, the room dimmed once more, not into darkness, but into candlelight. The kind of quiet that says a story has ended and a new one is just beginning. She climbed slowly, not rushing, not wondering too hard. The weight of the journal no longer in her hands, but its memory carried within her. Above her, the opening led into soft golden light, not a secret to be hidden, but a truth to be remembered. The quiet hush of the enchanted chamber slowly returned, like a soft breath drawn inward after the final note of a lullaby. The swirling memories that had danced through the air now shimmered gently one last time, before fading into a golden mist, returning to the walls from which they came. A soft warmth remained, not magical fire, but something deeper, like the glow left behind in the heart after understanding something that once felt forgotten. The student, now kneeling in the center of the room, clutched the worn leather-bound journal to their chest. Its pages had stopped fluttering. The enchantment was no longer showing the past, but holding it, preserving it, protecting it, perhaps, until the next one came in need. Tears still clung to the edges of their eyes, not from sorrow anymore, but from the quiet fullness that sometimes follows truth. They whispered a thank you, not to anyone in particular, but perhaps to the castle itself, or to whatever gentle force had guided them here. Candles dimmed to a low amber glow, flickering slightly, as though nodding in agreement that the story had reached its natural close. The portraits on the walls, those painted memories of faces long past, watched silently with peaceful expressions. Some even smiled. A few seemed to shimmer faintly and then quietly faded back into the shadows. Their purpose served. The room was still now, but not empty. Never empty. The student rose and took one faithful look at the walls, at the places where light had once danced and voices had echoed with long-lost laughter and tears. They moved slowly toward the door, the old wooden handle now glowing faintly as if remembering them too. With a small click, the door creaked open, revealing the corridor beyond, now lit with the soft, early hue of dawn. As they stepped outside, the cool breath of morning wrapped around them gently, a tender contrast to the warmth they had just left behind. The castle seemed quieter than usual, as if it too was still remembering. Down the corridor, distant portraits stirred from slumber, and suits of armor shifted in place with metallic yawns. The magic of Hogwarts was never loud. It simply hummed, lived, and remembered in ways few understood. The student did not look back right away. They paused, closed their eyes, and let the moment sink into their bones. The journal, still in their arms, felt lighter now, as though it had shared its burden. When they finally turned back to look, the door to the room had already begun to close on its own. Slowly, gently, as if the castle itself knew the story had ended, at least for now. Then came the softest thing of all, a feather, ivory and weightless, drifting down from somewhere above. It landed on the windowsill nearby, right where the student had sat when this strange journey began. No wind had blown, no bird had passed. It had simply appeared. A quiet sign, like a whisper from the castle, saying, "We remember you too." The student smiled, not broadly, just enough for the warmth to reach their eyes. Then, with the journal safely tucked away and the feather gently slid into a pocket, they began walking down the corridor once more, this time not searching, not wondering, but simply at peace. And far behind them, behind the walls and stones and whispers of Hogwarts, the magical room dimmed to the faintest glow. Its heartbeat slowed, its memories rested, until the next lonely heart wandered through those halls, drawn by the quiet pull of something forgotten, something waiting to be remembered. Sleep now, dear listener. Let the castle's soft breath lull you deeper. For Hogwarts, like all true magic, never truly forgets, and neither do its portraits. As the stars gently drifted across the quiet Hogwarts sky, the castle seemed to cradle its students in a warm, invisible embrace. Inside the Ravenclaw dormitory, tucked beneath soft blue and silver blankets, the young student rested peacefully. The journal, now closed and content, lay by their side on the nightstand, as if it, too, had found its place in the world again. The night had brought revelations that could not be written in textbooks, truths about belonging, memory, and the invisible threads that bind hearts to places. The enchanted portraits, the glowing footsteps, the whispered voices in empty corridors, each had played their part in leading the student gently home, not to a place, but to a feeling they had long forgotten. The feeling of being seen, of being remembered, of matter. Beyond the dormitory windows, moonlight kissed the tower tops, and the castle exhaled softly, its stone walls humming with quiet satisfaction. Somewhere deep within its magical heart, the room of whispers dimmed to a low candlelight once more. The portraits faded into stillness, their watchful eyes gently closing. The golden shimmer in the air dissolved like a sigh of fulfillment. In the soft silence that followed, a single enchanted feather floated down the corridor, dancing lazily on the breeze from an open window. It passed by old stairwells and half-forgotten statues before landing gently on the very windowsill where the journey had begun. It shimmered faintly, pulsing with a warmth not of magic, but of meaning. The castle, timeless and vast, had once again remembered someone who had slipped between its stories. And in doing so, it had reminded itself, and all who walked its halls, that no soul truly disappears when they are held in memory. That even the quietest student, the one who was never in any house, never called to a feast, never sorted, still mattered in the eyes of Hogwarts. Sleep came softly to the student now, not the restless kind of uncertainty, but the peaceful kind that follows being understood. And as the candles dimmed and dreams took hold, Hogwarts stood still in the night, watchful, protective, and ever ready to whisper magic into the hearts of those who truly needed it most. Sleep well, dear listener, for tonight you too are remembered, and in the quiet spaces of this magical world, you found a place where you belong.